Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Well, hey man, we're recording. Shut up. I gotta do the intro. The heck, man, newbies, I swear. So, and welcome to the Speak Nerd and Enter podcast. As always, I am Mark, Sean in the middle, and our special guest, Rich, because Kelly couldn't be bothered. Who knows what happened to him? It went right to voicemail. We don't know. He missed the deadline. And so we're desperately calling around, and Rich doesn't have anything better to do, so we talked him into joining us.
Correct.
Welcome,
I
Rich.
to waste my time with you today. Thank you.
That's right.
Yes.
So we now have a solid 30% of our listenership who are now online with us.
At least 50% of your likes.
Yeah, 50% of our likes and 30% of our listeners have been on the show at this point. So
That's right. Yeah. Listen long enough, you'll be there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for my invite, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, if I may, Mark, I really wanted to ask you this, and Rich, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I wanted to get your opinion if you have. Mark, you have now seen House of the Dragon, right?
I have.
Okay. All the stuff we've talked about, and with all the writing and storytelling of all these others, and all the different genres that are out there, of course, Rings of Power and all that. Fresh off your binge of House of the Dragon.
Yeah, I think 6 episodes, or
7, I believe it is now.
6 or 7.
But
okay.
Yeah, what do you think?
Okay, so to set the stage, I've been watching Game of Thrones with my wife, who has never seen it, and we just started, I think, season 7, right? So over the course of House of the Dragon coming out, I've been watching Game of Thrones with a newbie, and I had almost forgotten how great a show it was until the end. We all know, but those first seasons are amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The acting is so well done. The costumes are great. They cram so much into a given episode. Like, there's no episode where you were like, oh, nothing happened.
First 5. Let's be specific.
Okay, all right. Let's not be too, but it's really good. You know what I mean? And so when House of the Dragon came out, I watched the first one. My wife was in the other because I didn't want to watch it without her. But I wanted her to finish Game of Thrones. So I watched the first one. I was like, oh, that was pretty good. But then I stopped. And then, of course, Sean's been like, you got to watch it. And so finally I relented and I've done it. And so I'm fresh off Game of Thrones, literally in the middle of it. Watched these over the last week. And like I said, I really like it. It's got the same feel and the production value. And I can, some of the callbacks are fresh or forwards, I guess what we would call them. And I like it. And they threw me a curveball when the young actress turned into the old actress. And all of a sudden, fast forward, she's got kids. And I'm looking at her like, what happened? Wait a second. I'm like,
by the way, this is going to be full of spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers, whatever.
Spoilers.
But I was like, oh, so they did a great job of finding a woman that looks like her, but not. You know what I mean? Like, I had to go, that's a different actress. And then I realized, oh, they're old and they have older children now, and years have passed since the last episode. And so that was a little bit kind of jarring. But I was like, oh, okay, let's, I was expecting a more, like, Game of Thrones is immediate. Like, everything that's happening, from one episode to the other happens. There's no large gap of years. There might be like, oh, it's been a couple of months or something, showing that time has passed or whatever. But it's not like, 10 years later, here's what's happening. And that's just not the way that story has been told. And so this one seems a little more generational. And I haven't read the book that it's based on. So I know very little, and I'm fine with that. Like, I didn't want to go out and seek out information. I wanted to come in kind of blind. You know what I mean? And so I'm enjoying it, but they threw me a curveball when that happened. So in the last episode I saw, she married her uncle. Is that who he is?
Damon.
Yeah, she married Damon on the last episode that I saw, which is that the last one out?
That
the
is
next
the
one comes out like tomorrow or whatever. Okay. Yeah. So I'm caught up and I'm like, oh, okay. But I mean, the one thing I do know going in is there's going to be this civil war, and and people are going to die, and Harrenhal's going to get melted, and it's gonna, there's gonna be some things that it's the beginning of the end of their Targaryen dynasty, if you will.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, you're right.
the line
you're
will
right.
never
That
be as
is.
strong
Yeah.
again. Like that's the gist of what I know.
Right.
And so like I expected a lot of that to have already happened, and now we jump forward 10 years, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I know that the king's wife, who used to be what's her name's best friend.
Oh, you're talking. No. You're talking
the
about
queen lady.
Yeah, Allison.
Yeah, and I know that those two are like gonna be fighting or gonna be the point of contention. You know what I mean? From like what I've heard before the show came out or whatever. So like I know enough to be somewhat spoilery for myself, but it's an interesting setup. I actually don't mind the pace. Like I kind of like it that it's taking its time, and we're kind of seeing where we're going. So that is my initial take. Like it hasn't like culminated. It's not done. We're in the middle of it. It's all set up at this point, right?
Now, in comparison between, and of course, most people are, this is the big battle in the media is between which one's doing better, which one's better, Lord of the Rings or this, or Rings of Power or this.
That's a question.
I think it's pretty obvious.
It is. Well, Amazon's made it a question because Amazon keeps putting out their.
Amazon's not going to like the answer.
Rings of Power is #1 in viewership and all this stuff and all that. They're spinning the numbers and all that.
And I have watched Rings of Power as well. So
right, we have. So, in your opinion or your estimation, what do you think about the difference? Because you're seeing it, fresh. You've just seen that.
True.
The difference in writing, the difference in storytelling between that and something like Rings of Power, or not even just that, but so many other stories.
Yeah. So here's I have a couple of thoughts. One is I realize it's apples and oranges. Like Game of Thrones and Rings of Power is rated R. It's for a certain type of audience who wants to see that. You know what I mean? It's like violent and dragons and fire and some sex and boobies and all that stuff that Game of Thrones is known for. My friend Jody calls it Sex Castle. And so that's what I call it with my wife. I'm like, hey, you want to watch Sex Castle? And she's like, yeah, let's watch it. So that's our running joke is that Game of Thrones is like Sex Castle, right? Because it goes out of its way to show some nudity and but whatever. It's adult entertainment. It doesn't shy away from that. No one ever expected Lord of the Rings or Rings of Power to be rated R, to seek out that kind of, or be as visceral, I guess is what I would say. So I realize that there's some apples and oranges comparisons going on between the two. Having said that, Game of Thrones and I'm trying to blank. House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
No, House of the Dragon.
Sorry. Yeah.
They feel big. The settings feel big. They feel expansive. They feel like, like I know in Game of Thrones, they went around the world to film in different places. And you get a sense of how large this world is. I get less of that with Rings of Power, and I think I said, I don't know who I said this to, that, in the one episode where Galadriel is stranded on was it Numenor? Is that the island with all the men? And she's like,
yes, that would be the homeland.
Right. But she's there and she's like, we got to go save the Southlanders, give me some ships, give me an army. Let's go do this thing. And they're like, okay, you talked us into it. And they throw all their stuff, and this big battle culminates in saving a village, right? That doesn't feel big. You know what felt big?
Right.
Helm's Deep felt big. Battle of the Bastards felt big, right? These type of, this felt like, okay, 200 people on a horse came and saved 100 people fighting orcs in a village.
Yeah.
It didn't feel big. And I know what the budget is for Rings of Power, and do I like the costumes? Yep. Do I like the actors? I actually like Galadriel. I like that actress. What's that?
You like t-shirt scale mail armor?
Yeah, I saw that. I did see that.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. You got to cut the budget somewhere.
But
to pay for all the big name actors who were in it. And again, that's what I don't recognize any of the actors in Rings of Power. You know what I mean? Like they don't have Hugo Weaving, they don't have Legolas, they don't like these were big Hollywood actors in their own right who were in Lord of the Rings, the movies, the Peter Jackson
Although
movies.
they did secure the return of the Balrog. And there was some question as to whether he was actually going to take the role again because he didn't want to get stereotyped. So.
Okay, well, I'm glad he did. But again, the one time we've seen a Balrog
Nobody
in
wants
Rings
to
of
be Balrog
Power,
racist.
it was a flashback, right? Or it was somebody telling a story.
In this last episode.
Okay, maybe no. That was with the tree that creates the.
No. They had a thing in this last episode.
Did they?
With him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that escaped my notice apparently, or I did not remember that.
So I have an opinion as a content objector to both of these series whenever you are ready to hear it, because I watch reviews of all of these episodes, every frame of pause. So I see the episode, but I refuse to fund either of these atrocities.
Okay, so you haven't sat down and watched the episodes themselves. You watched other people talk about the episodes, like some ridiculous version of the Speak Nerd and Enter podcast. Is that what I'm
saying? Yeah, somewhat.
Okay.
So basically, I see every scene that you see.
All right. So, what are your thoughts from these inferior pretenders to the Speak Nerd and Enter throne?
I have my own thoughts, but the thing is as you know, I am a long-term Tolkien fan. I'm a Tolkien nerd, and what Amazon has decided to do with the professor's work and the follow-up of his son's work, Christopher's work, after both of them are dead, is just unforgivable to me. And having watched the episodes parsed out, one piece at a time, there's nothing there that speaks to me of anything like the respect that Peter Jackson paid to, or even Ralph Bakshi paid to the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series. The animated stuff is better than this garbage. It's really the fact that they're spending over $1 billion on this, and apparently that's no longer a fact, because from what I just recently read, Amazon has cut their budget.
Did they?
Yeah, they cut their budget going into the next season, so they're in trouble, and they know when they're in trouble, as far as I can tell. But it has nothing to do with anything that I've ever read in any of the histories of Middle Earth, or it's varying away from the appendices, which is what they have the rights to.
Yeah.
Which to me is ridiculous. And the thing I have against House of Unfinished Winds of Windsor,
Rich, is
he can drive all the RC cars he likes around his palatial mansion, but he needs to finish the book that he started. He's not going to make it.
He's not going to make it. But
I'm firmly convinced.
But see, that's the reason I don't mind. Actually, it's the reason I'm happy for House of the Dragon, is because I know he's not going to make it for the other stuff. And in a way, I'm actually glad. I'd like it to actually, at this point, I'm thinking if it never gets finished, it'll probably be better.
It probably will be better. Yeah.
I read the I read the novel. Okay. So I read I read that a long, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I read that. I loved the story. And I remember at the time telling Helena, this is the one I want to see on TV. And I tried to get her to read it and all that, and she wouldn't read it. She loves the show and all that stuff, but I can't get her to read it. But
it's a hard read.
No, this one was great.
Wait, in Game of Thrones or
no? I'm talking about House of the Dragon.
Oh, House of the Dragon. Okay.
Excuse me. The novel. So
right.
That one was easy read, quick. It was really good. It was kind of hitting the high points. It was like a narration of history, and you're reading this narration. And it was so well done, so exciting. Loved Damon. Damon was a great character. So many great characters in there. So many great quotes and stuff. And I won't
let me stop you right there if I would. I have heard you on multiple occasions, both online here and just offline with our conversation, talk about how much you love Damon.
Yeah.
I watched the show.
Yeah.
He's a cool character, right?
Yeah.
I love Doctor Who. Yeah, good job. I haven't seen anything from his character yet where I'm like, oh, he's so cool. I love him. So are you saying he's cool because you have from reading the book and seeing this translation, like, do you know things about what his character does and is
Yes.
from reading the book?
Yes.
Which is part of why you think he's so cool. Because I haven't seen.
Yes.
I don't think he's not cool, but I haven't seen it in the show yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Damon to me is a great character because so many people misread him. So many people misread who he is and what he's doing and why he does what he does and all that. Damon is, like I was saying, like I've discussed before, the villain is the best when they are closest to the truth, you know? Well, Damon, I don't see as a villain. He's kind of gray that way, but he sees the truth. He sees how ridiculous all of this stuff is, and he really not delights, but he actually cannot help but tear at all of these hypocritical veneers that society puts up, and constantly does that. And I love his character because of that, because he's also quite good at what he does. Great warrior, great fighter, dragon rider and all that stuff, respected, feared, loved, hated by everybody and all that, mainly because he's not playing the game. Everybody else is. And he's the one person who, regardless of who you are, regardless of what you say to him, he's just going to tell you exactly how he feels. He does not hide that. And I love that aspect of him, and I love what it has him do in the story. That's why I find Damon so awesome. He does have some amazing stuff that goes on, though, but I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to ruin it for you.
Okay, fair enough.
I also like Elric of Melnibone, especially when he has Stormbringer, but he doesn't.
But the characters
I just got those on audiobook, right? So Audible now has the entire Elric series on audiobook.
Fantastic.
I have not listened to them yet. I started to read them, but I was like, audiobook is so much easier for me driving to work and stuff. So
now, conversely, so I would urge you, Rich, that one actually I support. House of the Dragon is really well done, really good.
From what I understand, it is very good. Everybody seems to be liking it, even though, from what I understand, it's playing down some of the horrible nature of some of the characters.
Well, they can't explore everything that the characters have and have done and all that. And some of the stuff is being expanded upon that wasn't in the books. Because again, it was like a narration telling so-and-so went here and did this. And, it was said that they said this and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was really good, but it didn't have what you see in the series, for each of the characters. So they're adding a lot of that in. But because Martin is directly involved in the development of that and, overseeing the writing of and all that, it has the feel of Martin's work. And the level of and this is what's so sad to me, is that he was inspired so much by Tolkien. And so you can see that in his level of writing. His dialogue is just so well done. The legitimacy of my children has been put loudly to question, as opposed to Galadriel saying, "You will take me to his last known location."
Right, yeah.
One sounds more like Star Trek, and the other one sounds more like Tolkien.
Yeah.
From what I've read about Martin's opinion on Tolkien, he doesn't hold him in very high esteem. So
he does. He does. He thinks that Tolkien ended up falling in love with his characters too much at the end and wasn't able to do with them what he did earlier in Silmarillion and that sort of thing. But he holds Tolkien in high esteem. Tolkien was a huge influence on him. He talks about, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all that and how they influenced him. He really did. And his earlier work, The Silmarillion and Children of Hurin and all that, which of course was edited and added to by his kid and all that. But his stuff then was brutal, man. Children of Hurin had incest and all kinds of things, that you would have expected from Game of Thrones. And a horrible tragedy, but so well written, This ends up being, I understand and believe that the creators of the show wanted to pay homage to Tolkien, but I don't think they know how. I really don't think they understand the flavor of it and what it should be. And so it comes across as a fan fiction project to me. And it's heartbreaking. And so I don't.
It's very just terrible.
It is. It is terrible. The last episode I watched, as a matter of fact, I remember a girl up at work was asking me about it, and she said, "So should I watch that one?" I said, "Nah, you don't need to. Nothing happened." I mean, you're still waiting for Sauron to show up. It's supposed to be a story about him destroying Numenor, and he ain't anywhere out there. Following some old dudes breaking trees.
He's there. Seen him.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Sauron is not there. Sauron.
Look, we're waiting for Batman, not Bruce Wayne. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta drill that R like Galadriel.
But the level, but that's why I'm so glad you watched that, Mark, because I really wanted to get your opinion on that to see, there just is a massive difference in the creative ability of the one over the other.
And again, the apples and oranges nature of the two styles of storytelling, I'll say, right? Like, I'm not expecting the same, but going into Rings of Power, for something with that high budget and that high of production value and all the things they could be done, it feels small. Yeah. Some of the storytelling choices are just like, you'll take me to his last known location. I'm like, there's no please? Come on, man. I mean,
and how many times you have to see Galadriel beat up people? Come on, man.
Yeah. That was a little over the top.
Well known as a valiant and hirsute fighter on the battlefield.
Yeah, but not against. Not in a WB level setup.
Right. Feels a little Vampire Slayer or whatever. But and again, I like the actress playing Galadriel. I like her delivery. I think she's fine. Like, actually, I'm not looking at anybody in that show that I'm like, that person's not delivering.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that
on the lines. But I don't blame Natalie Portman for the prequels either. You know what I'm saying? Like, she did what she could do with what she was given. I'm not holding that against her. But like I say, at the end of the day, we're I don't know how many episodes are going to be, but we're in our mid-season big battle against the orcs, and we're creating, it's like and it was like 100 guys.
Yeah.
Like Helm's Deep was bigger. The Pelennor Fields battle, huge, right? The battle in front of the gates of Mordor. Bigger.
Battle of Five Armies.
Battle of Five Armies. I mean, it felt about the same size as Balin's Tomb.
Yeah, maybe.
Like a little bit bigger, but
I don't know. I think it actually felt smaller than Balin's Tomb. I honestly did. When they go out into the hall before the Balrog shows up, I mean, it was kind of big. And this was just kind of
But I mean, inside the room, there's just the fellowship and whoever's coming through the door, and they're doing the fighting, and but
this was like the orcs attack Saratsville.
And right. And here's the thing, though. Like, I really, if you have the money and you have the production value, you can put on a spectacle.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I don't want to turn this into a whole thing, but it feels like the showrunners or the writers are more interested in teaching me a lesson or cramming in a message than they are in entertaining me.
In capital letters.
And again, there's nothing wrong with putting a message into your entertainment. I don't have a problem with that. Right?
Yeah.
If it's done well, if it's crafted well.
Yeah, Jackson did it well with Gandalf's speech or discussion with Frodo about how some things bad happen to people and who can say whether it should or shouldn't, and that whole thing. Really well done. Really well done. But you contrast that with the speech that Galadriel had with that kid, Theo, or whatever his name is, and kind of a throwback, kind of the same thing. And it wasn't written as well. It just wasn't done as well.
Right. And that's the thing. I think I love her delivery, the lady Galadriel's acting. Like, I think she's doing a great job playing Galadriel. They're just not giving her the words.
Intensely.
Well, you've been wrong before, Rich.
Intensely. No, because look, at this point in the lore and in the history and in all writing about Galadriel was a devoted wife and mother to Celeborn and Celebrian. And they've taken her and turned her into an action hero. Galadriel's power stems from her grace, her elven grace. One of the oldest beings in Middle Earth. She's one of the most, for using a big word, puissant,
puissant.
Powerful. Yeah, powerful. Yeah, you pronounce it for me because I'm ignorant.
You're gormless.
He is one of the most devastating powers. She's a power of Middle Earth, which is why she ended up with one of the Elven rings. And if you contrast what they're doing with her in this series, and people bang on the Hobbit films, especially Tolkien purists bang on the Hobbit films intensely, but that scene where she walks into Dol Guldur and she sees the orc about to chop off Gandalf's hand, and she looks at him, and she's not overstated. She's not showing off. She's not swinging around and, stab, gut, cut. She looks at him and she says, "If you harm him, I will destroy you."
Rich, let me stop you right there. You hit a pause right out. Say again, all after destroy you.
Oh, she looks at the orc who's about to cut off Gandalf's ring for the Ring of Fire, and she says, "If you touch him, I will destroy you." And the orc only makes a slight motion towards her. He grunts and starts to move towards her, and she hits him with a blast of force so hard. She just waves her hand at him. She makes an explosion that rockets off into the distance, utterly demolishing him, disintegrating him, just to show the depth of her power without being overstated, without trying to be anything that she isn't, with all the grace and poise and elegance that Galadriel is supposed to have. And Peter Jackson, in that one scene, I love those movies just for scenes like that. He doesn't hit all the marks all the way through the films, but stuff like that, he captures the essence and the respect that should be given to a character like Galadriel that was established in The Lord of the Rings with the Mirror of Galadriel, and the fact that she was talking to the hobbits and to the Fellowship rather than her husband.
Now, I disagree with you, because I always saw Galadriel as John McClane of Valinor. But I agree with you. I've told Mark numerous times, the elves are missing in this show, not just Galadriel, but all of them, is that ethereal, like they're a level above kind of quality. And Galadriel's, like your example in Hobbit, is really well taken. There's a stateliness, there's a grace about how she does it, her style of battle, I'm sure, if you saw her with the sword and all that, she'd be great and wonderful. But just, there would be another level to it. It wouldn't be base. You know what I mean? And
it's beyond her. That sort of things like that.
Well, that's my point.
What it comes down to is the showrunners here were like, okay, we're not going to do that because it's easy. I think this is my opinion. It's easier to show Galadriel in a few scenes like that. They're like, how do we build a whole series on that grace? And they're like, we can't do that. We're not skilled enough to do that. You know what we can do? We can make a badass woman with a sword and let her do it. No, I'm not defending it. I'm saying that's what I think is going on here.
Oh no, I know
Makes
what's
sense?
going on.
And the fact is that even though, and I do believe that's what they were thinking, but the problem is they weren't even able to do that well, and it comes across as less than. And it's a shame. It really is a shame. There were scenes in The Hobbit, like you said, Rich, that I thought were really well done with the elves even, and how they fought and that kind of thing. And it's just missing here. Here it feels like humans with pointy ears just being pissed off and, that kind of thing. And there's no real otherness about them. Like Mark said, it kind of reminds you of the Japanese culture versus everybody
Western
else.
culture.
And there's something about that mystical, and like they've achieved something more, and you can kind of see it but not quite, that kind of thing. And it's missing from that show. Whereas in House of the Dragon, the writing in there is so well done. I told Helena at the beginning of it, I said, you don't know where this is going. You have no idea. You will watch this and think, like most people, okay, this is the hero, this is the villain, this is how it's going to go and all that. And then, of course, none of that happens. And it goes in wildly different directions. And that's,
but in lesser hands, that can feel like, oh, we're just messing with the audience. Look at my left hand. You think it's going to go over here. I fooled you, and I brought my right hand over here. Ha ha ha. That is never how Game of Thrones felt.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I remember reading the books.
Not till the end.
Not till the end.
Well, the show.
But again, he didn't write the ending of the show. Right. But again, reading the books, you're like, oh, who's this series about? Well, not Ned Stark anymore, is it?
Right.
Oh, not Robb Stark or his mom. You're like, oh my God, who's this series about? You know what I mean? And because of, and you see the missed opportunities, and you see if somebody had made just a different choice, how it could have changed so many things. And like that is not done. They didn't kill Ned Stark to give me a shocking moment.
No,
you know what I mean? Like, oh no, I can't believe they did that.
That's the thing. It didn't feel forced. It felt real. It felt
tragic.
Yes. You could look back on it and hate it, or that, that it happened, but you understand why. Because you're like, oh yeah, in the real world, you'd have a messed up history.
People would do stupid things like that.
Yeah.
The death of Ned Stark drove the events for all of his children and his wife and all of his relations. In the history of that universe, and it was, even though it was a minor thing in perspective, that one guy got killed, but one guy got killed that affected so much down the chain of the story. That
agreed, and we couldn't see that. Like, when he was killed, like, first of all, it was going to be like, oh, I'm going to let you go take the black, psych, and then they cut his head off, which everybody was like, oh no. You didn't immediately think, oh, and here's what's going to happen, and this is going to happen. Rob's going to, come down and declare himself king of the North, and this is it. Like, you didn't see exactly what the repercussions of that were going to be.
No.
And it was a discovery that we all went on together, whether you're reading the books or watching the show, that you're like, oh man.
And see,
and then they throw the Red Wedding at you, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right. And that was based on reality, and in House of the Dragon, the thing is that I've seen most people project the hero onto Rhaenyra, right? Helena would do the same thing. And I would have this discussion with Helena where she would be upset about something with Rhaenyra and say, well, but she should have she's outsmarted. And I said, who'd she outsmart? Who'd she outsmart? Give me the example. And she said, you're right. And I said, that's the thing. You want her to be this character, so you're projecting, but you need to look at it without looking at it like you're watching The Princess Bride, and realize Rhaenyra has actually created most of her own enemies, And if you look at it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And it's so well written how he does it, because you can see why she chose what she did. But like you said, Mark, it's a tragedy. If only she was a little less headstrong and was willing to do this. And the other beautiful part is it shows just how easy it is to be corrupted for almost anyone to be corrupted. And the one good person, the one really good guy, what happens to him? Dead. He gets burned up in his own house.
Oh no! Hold on. Let me stop you right there. Wait. My understanding from that scene was that wasn't her husband. He escaped in the boat. That was some other guy that they killed and put in the fire.
No. You're thinking of the wrong fire.
Oh, okay. Which fire am I thinking? Oh, the where they were trapped in the
hand.
Gotcha. All right, now I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah. Because all throughout it, people, and it's weird. People who are watching this are thinking he must have some ulterior motive. What's his motive? He's too good. No, he was a good guy. Went in there and, hey, I can't serve you anymore. I'm compromised. I can't do this. No, you're going to stay the hand, and then he ends up dying. And the way it's written is so beautifully done, so tragic, but it's real. And that's what keeps you going back. And I've seen so many people say, oh, I hated that. What a good episode. That's the mark of true genius when you write something like that, So, like you said, in lesser hands, it wouldn't work. You're just screwing with the audience.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing between the Rings of Power and House of the Dragon, the showrunners, or the people that are in charge of it, the people that are doing Rings of Power are treating it just like another piece of property. There's no passion. There doesn't seem to be any affection for any of the characters, any of Tolkien's. In fact, there's a disaffection and an actual pushing away of what Tolkien wrote, and detectable by an audience. And they want to capture that audience that's built in. The Tolkien property, I mean, for over 60 years.
I think
years. Well, 1 second. For over 60 years, I'll get it out and then I'll be done. For over 60 years, all they had were books. That's all they could go off of. So everything was in everyone's head, and they talked about it, and it came right off the page. But now we've got all this other media that people are trying to transmit this stuff over onto, and there was an audience that was generated that they wanted to capture. But if they don't have that same sort of affection for what the professor and Christopher did for these characters, it's never going to succeed. They're just going to be looked upon as usurpers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's lack of I think they do have affection. I don't think they have understanding. I don't think they went into it with the idea we're going to destroy this. I think they went into it thinking we're going to make something beautiful. We're going to, but they could not take themselves out of it. They couldn't separate themselves or their own storytelling biases or agendas or whatever they had. They couldn't take that out and think, okay, I'm going to make myself a vessel for what this would have been from this creator and write this. And because they couldn't do that, it comes out as a skewed vision that doesn't hew to what it was. And those who know it, it's like listening to a voice actor trying to imitate a well-known voice actor, iconic, like Darth Vader. You have Darth Vader and James Earl Jones' voice, and then you have a new Star Wars movie come out. What's the first thing everybody listens to? Is that James Earl Jones? Is that him? They're trying to listen to it, right? And you listen to it for the tenor, the tempo, the tone, all of that, to see, is that him? Well, I think it's the same with this. You go into it with the idea, I'm going to do justice to this, but if you can't take yourself out of it, you're never going to do it.
And how much credit does the Lord of the Rings movies deserve? You know what I mean? Because like Rich said, it was all in our head for years and years. And it was a couple of cartoons that don't count, whatever. I mean, it was cartoons.
They count.
Yeah. But Peter Jackson had that reverence for the source material.
Yeah.
And even his decisions where they had to change some things and leave some things out, we all understood. Like, we're all like, okay, we didn't get Scouring of the Shire. I would love to have seen that. Right? We didn't get Tom Bombadil. I'm happy with that. I was fine with that. You know what I'm saying? But see, that brings me back to Tolkien. No, that brings me back to Rings of Power. Like, think about it. Rings of Power literally could have said, hey, we got we got a license. Let's just tell the Lord of the Rings story in full. I'd have watched the heck out of it. Right? We could have seen, because it was very truncated when Frodo left the Shire. Right? It was like, oh, you have to go right now. Whereas in the books, he moved. They had a house next to the old forest, and he was planning this intricate like escape plan, and then come to find out that the other hobbits were in on it, and that kind of thing. The Barrow-wight scenes weren't in there. Tom Bombadil wasn't in there. And again, this is not a complaint. This is an observation. So if Amazon had said, you know what, we're gonna give you Lord of the Rings, the series, and we're going to put in the stuff that Peter Jackson didn't have time for, because in a movie format, there's only so much you can do. Would we be fans? Yeah. Would they be setting themselves up for a comparison? You bet they would. But we could have got all of that stuff. We could have got a much longer, slower burn on the entire story of Lord of the Rings, and put that stuff in. Would that have been more well received than what we're seeing right now?
Well, having listened to interviews with the showrunners, they said, and this is hubris. It's like the woman in the Star Trek, the new Star Trek series. The sheer fucking hubris.
There's 5 of them.
They said,
yeah, that doesn't narrow it down much.
but it's just in the Picard series where
I know. Right?
It says that to Picard. They said they were going to tell the story that Tolkien never could.
You see, I agree with you.
Tolkien. How dare you?
Well,
How dare
but
you?
see, that's what what I'm saying. They couldn't separate themselves from the storytelling. And if you're going to do it for someone else, for an iconic property like that, you have to. You have to vacate yourself like an actor,
Right.
an actor who's trying to do Lincoln or something like that. You can't go in there and say, okay, I'm going to do Lincoln, but he's going to be a Valley boy from California.
Here's my spin on Lincoln.
What's that?
Here's my spin on Lincoln.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, when
He's
you're
going to
doing
be
it
a
for something
vampire
like
hunter.
this. Now, if you're doing a spoof, or something like that, if you're doing Willow, go nuts, you know.
Right,
but that's what this feels like. It feels like a Willow level Lord of the Rings. And it's because they couldn't separate themselves out. And it's a shame because they had so much resources.
And it's not just Amazon that is guilty of this, right? I'm thinking, was it Ang Lee did one of the Hulk movies, right?
Yeah,
was that
Ang
him?
Lee, same thing. Yep.
And he's like,
trying to make
I'm gonna try to
fast food, you know.
Right. And so a lot of these, again, beloved character, plenty of backstory, plenty of source material to draw from. And you're like, I'm gonna go do something cool. We've got the whole prequel series or the new series that what's his name did, Rian Johnson for Star Wars.
Johnson,
right? Rian Johnson. It was like, J.J. Abrams delivers us a perfectly safe and serviceable. Okay, cool. Like it was fine. There was, I didn't have a lot of objections to it. And then Mr. Johnson comes in, is like, oh, all that stuff you kind of liked in that last movie, I'm gonna fuck with it because I can.
The character you really wanted to see do some really cool stuff. Yeah, I'm just gonna
kill
him.
not gonna do that.
He's not even really there. How about that?
Right. So the hubris that you're talking about, again, I think this is endemic of kind of, and I hate to put it this way, but Hollywood. You're in big entertainment, right? Because all of these people are working in big entertainment. And maybe they know the right people or related to the right people or worked on this other thing that was popular. Again, I'm not taking a deep dive on who these people are, but they got that job writing this show for some reason. And whether that reason was because, you check the right boxes or it's your turn or whatever, but it doesn't feel like you got this job because you're such a fan. And I think that's why Peter Jackson got the job.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the beginning of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Fellowship of the Ring, it almost never got off the ground. I mean, as you know, I'm very interested in all that entire filmmaking series. There were serious doubts that he could ever do it. There was a lot of talk that it could never be done.
Yeah, because he'd done very smallish horror movies up until that point. You know what I mean? He was not, George Lucas. Right, or Spielberg or some of these huge names. Like his name has become huge, right? Because of Lord of the Rings, I think.
Spielberg's Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I wonder what that would have been.
Ang Lee's Lord of the Rings, Justin Lin's Lord of the Rings, Quentin Tarantino's Lord of the Rings.
Quentin Tarantino's now the history not being the same, that would have made sense.
Right.
Who else does a good job with that stuff is Denis Villeneuve. I like his stuff with Dune and all that and Blade Runner. I think he's another one. He's another one of those unicorn directors who gets it with what he's doing.
Right, but every time they open their mouths, it is dripping with respect for the source material.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And like I say, that shows forth.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
Rich. Yeah. Now, I got to ask you, because I've asked Mark and I asked Kelly and I asked Drew, out of all those settings, all those universes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Including the 40K universe and all that, which one is your favorite? Which one do you love the most? Star Wars,
from a sandbox perspective, not this specific movie or that specific novel.
A sandbox.
From a sandbox perspective, it's 40K. 40K.
Okay, see? There you go.
That is the correct answer.
Yeah,
40K, it runs the table, doesn't it?
Yeah, it from the fact that you can tell, it's because it's got an unreliable narrator. The genius of 40K is that all stories told in the Warhammer 40,000 universe are told from a perspective of an unreliable narrator. Every story can have multiple sides, that not all of them are true, none of them are true, or all of them are true. If you look at the Horus Heresy, which I'm reading through
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, what's that?
I'm reading the Terra books right now, and they are just, you see the perspective, because these creators, and there's the Horus Heresy series in general, but Siege of Terra specifically has multiple creators writing each book.
Yeah.
So you see perspectives of different characters where someone would say, well, that guy's a villain. But then you read Betrayer and you see Karn, and you see the guy from the what is it? Word Bearers, the demon guy, Vol Darak, or whatever they're called. You see them from another perspective. You see Karn hanging out with Sigismund and them showing each other equal respect.
Karn, actually, I thought they did a beautiful job. You bring him up. I think they did a beautiful job at making him a sympathetic, tragic character.
Yeah. But even Angron, who's
Angron, I thought they did a beautiful job with that.
Genocidal butcher. He casts the entire idea of the Emperor being a decent human.
Oh, you see what happened.
That's right. Oh, he's being censored by Big Brother.
As soon as you brought the Emperor up.
That's right. The Emperor will hear none of that. None of that. Well, I was going to say, like, I read that Silent King book, which was about the Necron dynasties or whatever. Yeah. And they did a good job in there too of, like, because the whole book is from the perspective of these alien Necrons. You know what I mean? And so it's not like humans walking around wearing a suit. No, these are aliens, and he's got like subroutines or subminds and whatnot.
Yes.
And so he's having like conversations with himself because he's got a tactical submind and like a history submind. He's like, you shut up, you answer this. And like the author did a great job of kind of fleshing out.
Do you remember who wrote that one? Because I read that.
I'd have to look it up. I have the second one on deck to listen to coming up. But like I said, it was really well done.
Now remember, the one you have to read next, though, or the one you have to listen to, is Emperor's Legion.
Emperor's Legion, okay.
Yeah, Emperor's Legion was great. I wanted to ask Rich if he gets himself together there about if he has read that. But so many, and of course he ends up having his technical issues while he's talking. I've been waiting so long for somebody who's been reading those books to do that. And then, of course, he has to
be able to jump on, and then, of course,
But Aaron Dembski Bowden has a line he uses about that, where he said the thing he loves about 40K is that everybody's wrong. There is no faction that is 100% right. At the Tau, the humans, the Eldar, all of them, they're all wrong. And that gives you a lot of interesting narrative to explore.
The Harlequins might be the most right of all of the wrong.
Do you think?
I do. Like, I think they get it. They understand what happened.
I think
and
maybe
why it was so bad and whose fault it was, and that kind of thing. Like,
I think maybe
they have that perspective that all of the other races and even other people within the Eldar don't have.
See, I think maybe the Solitaires. I'm not sure the other Harlequins even have the depth. I think maybe an inkling, but I don't understand. I don't know if they have the depth for it, because the Solitaires.
Right, but remember, when they're not fighting, they're going around teaching the history of what happened.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that the Solitaires, because they changed they kind of retconned them a little bit.
Yeah.
So that the Solitaires now are essentially sacrificing themselves to Slaanesh when they die. And I thought, wow, that actually does kind of show that they have such a perspective or understanding on what's going on that they're willing to even go to that length. And they're not followers of Slaanesh, of course. They just, that's going to be their end, and it's tragic and beautiful and all that. And I thought that was pretty cool. All right, Rich, you were talking about the Emperor and how wonderful he is.
Yes, and then I was taken out by one of his Colexis assassins on the street. But the thing is that the reason why I have such a affection and I feel that the 40K universe is such a deep background source is that you never know if the narrator's telling you the truth. You never know if the narrator's got it wrong. You never know. Nothing is. It's in the grim, dark future. There is only war, and in war there's a fog, right? And all narration in the Horus Heresy and the 40K universe is a fog of war. Because the universe, it actually takes on the scope of the universe. Like Mark was talking about with the Necrons are a tragic story, but they're horrible. They're horrible beings if you're in their way, or they need something that they have to disintegrate you for. But their story is a tale of tragedy and sorrow, and you find out that every story in the 40K universe is a tale of tragedy and sorrow. Nobody, even the Tau, aren't good guys, because the Tau, the Tau, they try to pass themselves off as, oh, we are, we're one race and we bring everyone in. And it turns out that they're being corrupted from the inside out. So, stuff like that.
Well, also, if you don't join their collective, they just wipe you out. So, there's that.
Now we've got the Leagues of Votan, which, have their ancestor spirits and stuff like that. Great lore, great background. Unfortunately, the rules were a little bit too strong, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
But the lore, I mean, I have to give it up to them. For something like the Squats, which is what the Leagues of Votan are, for them to coax such energy and such great storytelling out of something that were just basically space dwarfs. I mean, that's what they were created as.
Right, which were essentially short Imperial Guard back in the day. Like, there was nothing really special about the Squats. They were technical, Imperial Guard guys that had, choppers and
but then it gets
stuff. That was it.
Into the whole.
They had the John Blanche touch. That's right. Everything had to have a freaking
got
chopper.
trikes and choppers, baby. Got to have those wheels, but the fact that they brought them back for the new ones, but they're grab wheels is even better. But the fact that touches on the idea that humanity expanded out through the universe, and when it expanded out through the universe, those that were isolated adapted to their environments and became fundamentally an entirely different race. It just speaks to the thing about Games Workshop's collective storytelling is that they all try to play off, that no one undercuts anybody. Everybody tries to respect what came before and to integrate it into the whole story. And even if the story goes 180 degrees in the other direction, that's integrating what came before, and there's a whole history that is just maintained throughout the entire timeline of the 41st millennium. If something needs to change, well, the narrator was wrong. It's unreliable.
It goes to what you were talking about passion and respect for and that's what all of the authors have, is that all of them have a deep respect and love for the 40K universe. So instead of, this one-upsmanship that you get with like Star Wars, where Rian Johnson is, I'm going to change all of this, I'm going to subvert your expectations and all of that. Everybody here, from Aaron Dembski Bowden to Chris Raitt to, Dan Abnett to, all of them, they have a deep, deep, deep respect for this intellectual property, and it shows in the writing, and it has a common theme. Even if, as you said, there are discrepancies here and there and all that, it still has the same tone. So it's kind of like reading the Bible, right? It's got the same tone, but there's discrepancies between the Gospels, and it doesn't detract. It actually kind of shows the reality of it, wherein that's kind of how it would be, right? And I really, really dig that, because you're right. The love comes through for the property. As cruel, as evil, as dark, and all that as 40K is, there is that shared feeling of respect for the property that comes through that makes it almost like comfort food, if you will, when you're reading it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a very contributory process. Everyone is contributing to the process. No one is trying to make a mark that is bigger than anyone else's. It's all like, I'm part of a thing that's bigger than me.
Right. My wife saw a video and she was going to send me the link to it, and essentially it was talking about storytelling. And so we were talking about it today, and she was like, in this video, they were talking about, like, in storytelling, some, you have like these 4 parts, and one of them is like the setting and the characters, and I forget what the other 2 were, but we were talking about it, and I was like, that makes so much sense, because in a lot of science fiction, the setting is the main point, whereas in other types of fiction the character is more important, right? And in other areas it's the conflict, or I forget what the other ones were, but like that got me thinking about 40K. Like setting is in many ways more important, because a lot of the stories have very unimportant characters, right? or the characters, they might be important to the story, but at the end of the day you're an Imperial Guard dude, or you're one Marine out of all of this, or you're like, you don't matter. It's the overall setting that is more important. And I've read books that I'm not 40K books, but I was reading this one and it was like, this big war is going on, and like Colonel so and so or Lieutenant so and so. I'm like, I don't care about Colonel so and so, Lieutenant so and so. They're just there for you to show that there's a big battle and these tanks are doing this and these planes are doing that. And how many times have we joked about the ruinous Ichor and all the Imperial Guard guys getting gunned down and killed, and and then we're gonna clog their barrels with our bodies so they can't shoot anymore and whatnot.
Do you remember I used to put that in the synopsis of our game sessions? The ruinous Ichor saturated the earth. But
you know what it reminds me of?
What?
It reminds me of Marvel and DC before they lost their way. Before they lost their way, Games Workshop still hasn't lost their way with this property.
See, I think it's even better. I think it's even better than that. I really do.
I'm just saying thematically, it's contributory. Back in the day, in the old days of the Marvel bullpen and the DC bullpen, everyone knew that Superman was more important than what they were writing about him.
Yeah. And that he was going to get those Hostess Twinkies back from Lex Luthor.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, those fruit pies ain't going to sell themselves.
That's right. That's right.
What's funny is I don't think Rich has heard that episode, because I don't think it's out yet.
But I know the advertisement he
picked up immediately on that reference.
Yeah.
He's talking about the Hostess advertising.
Yes. I talked about that in last week or whatever. Right.
But in 40K, I really love the way they're doing the 30K stuff, the Siege of Terra, the Horse Heresy, and all that. I really do like how they're doing that. I'm enjoying the pacing of it. I'm looking forward to the culmination. But man, it has been a really good ride going through there. And I told Mark in this last one, did you read Echoes of Eternity yet? Rich?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I'm reading through the Siege of Terror books, and I'm just going through them one at a time, and I'm at the very end of the first book. I know the story, like I know the synopses, but I'm reading the books themselves.
Okay, so I'm not going to ruin anything for you with it, but
don't worry about it,
because you already know how it ends and you know what happens. But Echoes
is the Emperor going to be okay?
Actually, he's going to be fine, apparently.
He ends up better than Horus, that's for sure.
Well, if you read the Indomitus stuff, he's actually on the mend. The Echoes of Eternity is about Sanguinius fighting Cabanda and fighting Angron.
Yep.
And it is done really, really well. Aaron Dembski-Bowden wrote it. And I love his take on it, where he's got Sanguinius as really heroic character, because the way he wrote it was so good. It wasn't the typical, Horus speech or any of that stuff, that kind. Although Horus actually has a good bit of self-doubt and all that too. But Sanguinius,
Horus is a tragic character.
He's is. Tragic. But this is the thing, is that Sanguinius in here, when he knows this stuff is coming, and he's honest. The way he writes him is honest, where he goes up there and he's getting ready to go do his thing, and one of the guys is, talking about the memory of this and what happened. And he's saying, what Sanguinius said was, I don't want to be here. He said, I don't want to be here. He said he didn't hesitate. He didn't falter, none of that. But he was honest and said, yeah, I don't want to be here. And then he took off and fought the demons and stuff. And that part to me was so well done. That really gets the 40K universe, in a nutshell. It really does.
Everything is horrible. Everything.
It is. It is. Horrible. And even these demigod-like beings are not above the horror. You know what I mean? And that to me was really, really well done. I really like that stuff.
It's the retracting sense of scale in the 40K universe too. So you can have a story, an entire novel written about a bunch of guys like Gaunt's Ghost. Just a bunch of guys, who get into some hairy situations, and that's a small scale thing.
I call those books, by the way, Mark books, because they're about Imperial Guard.
Mac
Yes.
Bolan in space.
Yeah, Mac Bolan in space, right?
But that's like a very small sense of scale. But then you could draw it back and then look at the planet, and then you could look at the solar system, and then you can go to battles in space, and then you go into the intrigue and the political.
And then you get back finally to the point where you see my Inquisitor on his way to enacting Exterminatus.
Exactly. As
there's Imperial Guard there, Exterminatus.
For anybody who doubts the Emperor in any way,
doesn't
matter.
You could
say
let's
one
be
word,
honest.
Exterminatus.
Let's be honest. It's the 40K universe. If they've had dealings with anything that's not human or suspicious in any way, it's better just to nuke them from orbit, just to be sure. So,
but it calls into question, like you start to question your own feelings about the villains. It's like you look at the villains and you're like, well, the Tyranids, they just want to survive. It starts to allow you to just take things that you would normally take for granted. It causes you to think about them as like, am I really looking at this from the right way, or am I just looking at it from one way? Yeah, are we the baddies?
Who's the real monster here, Dante?
Maybe they're all the baddies. It's like they locked up Slanesh. Why did they do that to him? He was nice. All he wanted to do is make people happy.
Slanesh, yeah,
that's right.
And then
what if we try to communicate with the Tyranids?
Oh, we've done that.
There's stories about the fact that in the early days of 40K, Tyranids were in the Imperial armies.
Yeah.
they had Tyranid allies. Like there are stories about Tyranids.
Well, they had the Zotes
allies to work.
Yeah, the Zote mercenaries.
Yeah, the Zotes who were the emissaries.
I love me a good Zote.
Did you see the apology video that GW put out for the League of Osan?
No.
Oh, this dude named James
James
Workshop is sitting there and whatnot. Yeah, but he was talking about, just got to go work on the Zote Codex and give them all like a 2+ invulnerable.
Look, let me tell you, that Zote that they have for Kill Team, that dude is a badass, and it's an awesome model. I like me some Zotes.
I love the Zotes. I thought they were cool, man. I really did.
Like I said, I would love. That's one of the things I really like about them bringing out, because those are the only new faction, and they're not even new, but the Leagues of Atan are a new faction, essentially, but they're bringing back squats from back in the day.
Amazing work on a
they're doing a great job, subject. But like I would love to see some Zotes, right? You know what I'm saying, or see something new.
Yeah.
Right now they're not doing new, but they're bringing us the old stuff in a way that is new. You know what I mean? Like Leagues of Atan are hot, right? The Ambles, but the Amble's not an army.
No.
Like,
but the fact that they did
the old stuff and exploring that in a bringing it back and exploring it in a proper way.
Yeah, you get a Jacaro now.
Remember the Jacaro in the original book? They were talking about the Jacaro were so smart, so good at what they did. Their spaceships didn't even have walls.
Right.
It was just, they knew how to build these things with a frame that had just generated some natural field that held things together and all that. And the Slan had this empire there that was like really, nebulous because nobody could go in there and all that stuff. And all these things that I would love to see explored as well. Getting on towards, because they've mentioned the old ones and all that, and getting on towards that stuff. I would love to see that. That's why I was so happy to see the Amble come back and the Dwarves come back, or, the squats and all that.
Yep.
Really cool stuff. And there's a lot of opportunity there with that stuff. Rich, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Because I would love to see, and we'll probably make this, I guess, the last bit because we've been going for a while now.
For a minute.
But I'm so excited to be able to talk to
nerd.
somebody about 40K novels and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I would love to see a 40K Game of Thrones level production, right? Or especially Horus Heresy, right?
So would Henry Cavill, apparently.
Oh, yeah, I think he did. Dude, I'm all for that.
That's too easy. He needs to be the Ned Stark of that series.
Well,
get us in the door, cut his head off, and then go from there.
He could play. There's a half a dozen characters he'd fit into. He'd fit into Sanguinius. He'd fit into the Emperor. he'd fit into any of the villains from the Horus Heresy.
I think him playing because he wants to play Constantine Valdor.
Yes,
because he loves the Custodes.
Goldie boys.
He does, and I think he'd be great as that. I think he would. When I see him, I could see him as Constantine.
Oh yeah.
Although he might look weird with a mohawk, but
well, I mean, I saw something these last few months, and specifically yesterday, that I thought I'd never see: Magic the Gathering 40K decks. I'll tell you, 10 years ago, could knock me over with a feather. I would like, no, there's no chance, and they're good. I actually played against them yesterday, and
did you go to like an event last night?
Yeah, I went to did a little FNM Commander because I am also a nerd, and I played against the Necron deck and the Inquisitorial deck, and let me tell you, they're on point. I mean, they did.
All right, what did you play?
Oh, I played dinosaurs.
Oh, so you played your regular Magic deck?
I brewed up a deck 2 days ago and just put one in, and then proceeded to slap around the entire store. So I felt like a bad man because I made an accidental combo that I didn't know I made.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. Sounds like Mark.
Well, that's what like people were complaining, like, oh, I expected
thing.
the Silent King to be a better card, and it's not about how good the individual card is.
He's on a
synergies
card
with the rest of the cards in the deck. You know what I mean? You get a good synergy, you're off to the races. So
he's on a Magic card. I'll tell you, 15 years ago, that IP they would have spit upon Magic the Gathering.
Right. No, I remember working at GW and again, Magic had blown up in the 90s, you know what I mean? And I worked there in the mid to late 90s having that conversation. And that was when everyone had a card game. Heck, even Games Workshop had their own card, you know.
They had a couple of them for same games. Yeah. Right. They were terrible.
Yeah,
they were terrible.
But again, that was that glut. Everyone put out card games are hot, and everybody was putting one out, and like everyone and their mother was putting one out, and you know.
Well, that's always been the thing about them is that, and I understand why they're a bit xenophobic about letting anybody else do anything with their stuff, and which is why World of Warcraft came about, and all that. I understand why, but I think there's some missed opportunities for them there. But that's all right. You got a big future.
It's funny you mentioned that because we all know each other's histories, and to be told by people on the internet that World of Warcraft had nothing to do with Games Workshop, its creation had nothing to do with Games Workshop. It's like,
yeah, it did.
I might know a little something about a little something here. And I'll tell you, I maybe heard some conversations you didn't hear here on the internet before it existed. So, maybe you want to slow your roll a little bit.
Some of us may have been there when that stuff went down,
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Rich was also a GW employee. So everyone on this podcast has at one point been a Games Workshop employee. So.
Yes.
I was an Uber nerd.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
we all were.
Nerd. Yes.
We all were. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is how I ended up meeting Robbie.
Yeah. In fact, that's how we met.
I ended up meeting
Rich, right? Yeah. Rich and Robbie both.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when Rich started working there.
Yes. Back in the 90s. Yes. And Robbie had his Blood Bowl team that would put you on it.
Robbie. But I was going to ask you, do you think that they could put together do they have the capacity now to put together a project that would?
I don't think so.
That
I don't think we're there yet.
The Horus Heresy.
I don't know. Well, the Horus Heresy, absolutely not. I don't think there's people with enough endurance in the entertainment world. Like Peter Jackson was a fluke when he did Lord of the Rings. Like he snuck that in under the radar, It's such a well-known property, and it's becoming more well-known when guys like Henry Cavill, I played 40K on national television,
Right.
There has to be even more than the Lord of the Rings. I think this is, as much as the Lord of the Rings is a deep property, the 40K universe is, and this is not to cast any aspersions on the professor's work, but the professor was a one-man show. He wrote everything himself. Here you've got hundreds and hundreds of people all contributing to a shared universe and clinging to the respect for it. I don't think that there's anyone in the entertainment business right now, from what I've seen, that could, unless it's a Peter Jackson type, that could come close to doing it justice. It would.
Oh, you're talking about to
fall
be
short.
the showrunner or to like
not even the
be
showrunner,
the head of
but
that project or whatever.
It would have to be on every level of the project, on the production design, on the sets, on the props, on the actor selection.
Yeah, and GW has this history of keeping things in-house and close to the vest and being protective of their IP, that Hollywood has a history of, we want this property and then we're going to run off and do whatever the F we want with this property. Like I remember seeing interviews with Orson Scott Card. They've been trying to get Ender's Game forever, right?
Yeah.
As a property. And he'd be like, yeah, well, Ender is like 11 years old in the book, right? And so we'd always get this contract and they'd scour the contract, and buried in an appendix somewhere was this rider that would let him make Ender 16, 17, 18 years old, right? Because Hollywood wanted to get an older actor or, have a love interest and do all these other
He was a kid in the film,
things.
though, wasn't he? He was like,
no, I know. But over the years, he's like, every time Hollywood came to us, they would try to sneak in the permission to change the core tenet, because the core tenet of Ender's Game is he's so young and he thinks he's playing a game.
Right.
When he's like in command of our armed forces,
genocide
and killing people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
in a big way.
Spoilers, right? And it's a different story if he's 16 and he's got a girlfriend.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, in answer to your question, Sean, I don't think they're there yet. The other thing is that the 40K universe is not amenable to modern day belief systems and politics that they like to push through those entertainment venues. It is a hard.
But you don't think with the only reason I would say that there is a chance for that is because of Game of Thrones.
I think they'll do it. I just don't think they'll do it right. I guarantee you they'll do it.
And I think it's going to come down to, because they're sitting on intellectual property that I think is every bit as valuable as the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, you want to see
$1 billion, or Dune, or the Matrix, or Star Wars, right? And it remains to be seen how, whatever they're going to do with it. So if you were in charge of this property, would you be like, here, Hollywood, right? Who has a mixed history, like in fact,
screwing stuff up.
I dare say Hollywood has more of a track record of screwing up properties that, how many good video games movies have we gotten? Almost none.
Yeah.
Right. I'm having trouble thinking. I can think of 10 bad ones. Which one? Okay.
Film. But they also, Silent Hill clung to the spirit of the video game. It was creepy. It was scary.
Right.
You know?
But again, one good horror movie is not the same thing as how do I bring the 40K universe to media, and whether that is movies, television, some combination of both, right? And so my honest opinion is, with Warhammer Plus, I think they're looking at what Marvel did.
Yes.
As like, because Marvel movies were hit or miss until Marvel Studios was like, we're going to be in charge of this now, and we're going to have a plan, and we're going to,
do you think they
tie all these in together? And they've done a great job.
And then they got bought by Disney and got screwed up.
Do you think they have enough capital to be able to do that?
No.
Well, here's what I said when
either.
all of the lawyers were wrangling over The Hobbit and whether that was going to get made. I was like, look, man, Lord of the Rings made $1 billion. That kind of money, everybody just wants their piece, and all the lawyers are wrangling because everybody was like, oh, The Hobbit's never going to get made because the lawyers are fighting. I was like, no, there's money on the line here. People are just fighting for their piece of that money. It's going to get made. You know what I mean? So if Games Workshop comes out and is like, hey, man, we want to do this and we need some financing. Who wants a piece of, who's got some financing and some things? Do you think that some of the big studios aren't going to be like, yes, we would like to be involved in this collaboration? Look at Sony and Marvel, right? Sony was like, no, we got the license for Spider-Man. You can't have it. And they were like, well, we can do a better job than you. Okay, here's the license. Let's split it.
Well, you also have Sandman too, which, even though, my feelings on Sandman, but they did hew closely to the story because he was involved.
Well, the creator changed his own story.
Well, but that's fine. That's fine. If he's going to do it,
he's the one that's allowed to.
Yeah, I understand.
Right, and it's going to keep the same tenor because of that. And it did.
And decisions are going to have to be made on what to change and how to present things, right? And so there's going to be some level of compromise in the same way with Lord of the Rings movies. Like, we don't have the Scouring of the Shire and we have some compressed timeline.
We don't have.
We all understand those,
Well,
and we're like, yeah, right.
See,
and
but
we're
they
like,
have a
okay, they
chance.
still did a good job.
See, they have a chance though with streaming to be able to do an actual long running
Right.
GOT level kind of
Right.
project that just, you know, you can tell.
Can you imagine
all
how long,
kinds of stories.
You could tell the horror, like if you took a year long. So if you figure that you figure one season of a show is 13 to 15 episodes. If it's a long
Not
series,
on Disney.
right? No, I know that's 6 or 7.
I'm talking about a 4.5 episodes.
Series. I'm talking about a good series.
Yeah.
You know, a season. Can you compact enough of it's such a vast story. The story is epic. It's epic in a way that because it spans an entire galaxy and it takes into account the actual scope of a galaxy. Like it uses real science to say, yeah, you know, without the warp, we could never go to the next planet, next solar system, let alone the next part of the galaxy. You know, so I honestly don't think they'd have a hard time explaining what they'd need to explain to somebody who they just wouldn't have the tolerance.
Right, but I think you're thinking too small. Marvel is not trying to tell every aspect of the Marvel universe in the Iron Man movie. Right. And so again, if you're going to take 40K and turn it into this type of media, it's going to be more akin to Marvel than it's going to be Lord of the Rings or rather Game of Thrones. It's going to have to be multiple movies and multiple shows set in that universe that build on each other and get us to where we need to be.
Like what Warhammer Plus is doing now.
Well, Warhammer Plus has been a disappointment to me. I've got Warhammer Plus, and they don't put out nearly enough stuff. Not nearly.
The quality varies. Like their animated stuff is good. The computer animated stuff is not as good. That one animated series that they have on there where they're telling the vignettes of. Like they told the vignettes, excuse me. Vignettes.
Hammer and Bolter.
Yeah, Hammer and Bolter.
Yeah.
Hammer and Bolter. Yeah. That series is probably the best one, the one I enjoy the most. Like the story that they told about the Adeptus Mechanicus priest with the robot was great. Yeah. You know, the one with the Eldar and the Spirit Stones and the Titan was great.
The Necron one.
Necron one, with the Chaos Space.
And I actually enjoyed the one I wanted Mark to watch was Hamilcar. I thought that was pretty cool. You know? I thought Mark would really like that.
Very, very high quality series, that one. And that one captures in a small way, they could do something like that's like a creep show style story where they have stories that are connected with a thread, but they're different stories. And they could do something like that on a big production screen that would just inflame the interest of people and say, oh, I want to know more about this, and use it as that kind of vehicle rather than trying to tell the grand story.
But
I don't think you start with Horus Heresy. I think you start with
no,
I think you do.
What's going on right now in the
and I'll tell you why. Is because Star Trek and Marvel have conditioned the audience to simply jump in.
That's true. That is true.
Not have to have everything explained, not have to have this building and building and building. But here you are, story started, just jump in and you're going to catch up as you go along. And
that's what makes it exciting, actually. You got to go back. Yes. I was like, oh, I want to find out about this. Oh, did you know about this? Oh, did you know about that?
And you don't have to sit there and try to rationalize some sort of scientific or magical.
And that's also the thing with Game of Thrones.
Yes.
The way it's written, like, they're literally talking about this history, and it's not like spelling it out and info dumping things. You know, they're just talking about, hey, this is what happened, and oh my god, I can't believe that happened, and you know, Rhaegar killed, you know, your niece, and we went to war, and I defeated this guy on the Trident, and now I'm king. And you're all like, where's that show? We haven't seen that. We're never gonna see.
And you ain't gonna.
You know,
right?
I remember as a kid when Super TV was out. I remember watching Blade Runner, right? And I had never seen, I was a young kid, however old I was at the time, but very young kid. And I remember that coming on, and Blade Runner was kind of the same thing. Well, they had the blurb at the beginning where they were describing things, but I didn't read that.
But it just cast you into the world. Like there was stuff
everywhere. It cast you into it. And as a kid, I remember thinking, wow, I wonder what this world is, and wanting to learn about it. And that's kind of how real life is, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's an inherent trait in people that they will do that, and now they're expecting it in movies because of those properties. I think it's a good opportunity to do so because we're kind of predisposed to that. Well, I don't know. I'd just like to see it before I die.
I think Sean, you will. If we happen to live for a few more years, we will see something, a live action encapsulation of some portion of Games Workshop's universes. I think that's almost a guarantee.
And I agree. I think there's money to be made, and these rights are going to be like, there's a lot of money to be made. I would say I would rather they do it right than do it fast or do it easy.
And that's
you know what I mean? Yeah,
I would rather.
It's what it feels like they're doing, because they could have done much more before now. You know what I mean?
They could have. I would just like them to do it as right as they can before I die.
Yeah.
Specifically for all of us, and mention all of us in every scene.
Yes.
I think
every single one. Yes. See, and you have certain actors.
This ends now, Horace. Rich said so.
Rich, thinking the Imperial Guardsman who jumps in front of the Emperor.
No,
that'll be Rich.
And there's what are you talking about? I'm standing aside, baby.
But see, you have certain actors that you could use for it. Dave Bautista could be any one of the Primarchs. You have Dwayne Johnson who could play Vulcan. That's right. You have
Dave Bautista,
what's his face? Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill, yeah.
You have a number of different characters.
Right. Michael Cera as Sanguinius.
Yep.
Michael Cera. Or Jesse Eisenberg. Either
yeah, right. Either one.
They're essentially the same person.
He's the stunt double. Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to see that. That would be so cool. I've just been spoiled because of the Marvel thing and, Star Wars and Dune and all that getting, something of that level. I'd just love to see that, man. I would. Who wouldn't love to see a live action Zoe? Come on.
Good luck on that one. We're animated.
Forget that, man. How'd you like to see whether it's I think it probably would make a great movie. I don't know if you do a series, but what about Space Hulk?
That was what I was thinking would be a good boarding point.
That would be a good self-contained monster in the house type movie that you could be like, oh no, we've got this tech we've got to go get. And
it would harken back to their first advertising video.
But it's funny you mentioned that, Mark, because I always felt like Event Horizon should have been a 40K movie.
Many people have brought up that look, Event Horizon was kind of cross-pollinated with the ideas that the guys from Event Horizon must have been reading some part of Rogue Trader, and some parts of Rogue Trader have now drawn upon what they did in Event Horizon. Truly a genius movie, and unfortunately, there's a long cut of it that got apparently lost in a fire or destroyed, but I'd love to see it sometime. That movie blew my mind when I saw it in the theater. It was great.
See, when I saw that in the movies, I saw that with Helena at, I think, Springfield Mall, and I remember telling her, saying, that seems a lot like Chaos. That just seems very much like 40K.
Yeah, I just remember that dead frozen dude floating. You're like, oh my gosh, and then the gravity comes on. You're like, oh man, but imagine doing that with these big armored Terminators, walking through there, and man, the things we could do with Tyranids now. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah,
even not Tyranids, right? If we wanted to go with,
because Tyranids,
forget Space Hulk for a second, right? What if it's derelict Imperial ship and their Jeller field failed, right?
Yeah.
And they're boarding it, looking for some VIP or some tech or some whatever, or find out what happened.
You said that, by the way, Mark. Their Jeller field. It made me think
of Geller Field. I'm pretty sure
it is Geller Field, but it's funny to think of a jelly field.
The Jello field.
Wobble, wobble, wobble. It's like poking on Jello. Keeps them out.
Mark's getting hungry.
You have to get it prepped and let it set for 5 hours.
Yeah, you gotta let it set for a minute.
All right. Well, this was fun, Rich.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate the opportunity. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's great to have somebody I can talk 40K with, because I can't get Mark to actually listen to, the stuff I need him to listen to. So,
man. I'm spending a lot of time painting. So,
all right. Well, Rich and I are going to leave you out when we start talking Conflict 47. So.
Oh, man. That's another great property. About to get right too.
Yeah.
So
we'll leave that for another episode.
Yes. Definitely.
Yes, we will explore that again. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you very much, and I will see you on the next episode. Now, get the hell out.
Get the wave. Everybody waves at the end. Bye.
Yes.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.